Hey scholars, so yesterday you watched a video about telling time. Today we're going to introduce more about the clock and talk about how we can tell our time. So before we get started, here's our clock. What is something you notice about the clock? Right, there's numbers all the way around and it only goes up to the number 12. Right, and then you have these smaller numbers. It goes to 60. And we have two different hands. And for this clock, luckily they made the hands two different colors to help us out. So we have a hand that's our shorter hand, which is called our hour hand. And we have our long hand, which is called our minute hand. And when we're telling time, you first always look at the short hand, the hour hand first. So it's pointing to our 2, so we know that's where we start. And then our minute hand we read second. So I want to go over a few facts with you before we start telling the time on our clocks. So let's get started. So when telling time, we have two different types of clocks. We have something called an analog clock, which is what we just showed, and our digital clock, which just has our numbers. We're going to start focusing more on our analog clock. So like I said, we have our two hands. We have our small hand, our short hand, and our long hand, which is our minute hand. And again, it says the short hand is the hour hand. So that's where we look first. Next, then we will look at our minute hand, the long hand. The long hand is the minute hand. So then we will look at this hand next. And there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. So for us to get to a new hour, to get from 3 to 4, this minute hand, it goes around, it takes 60 minutes for it to go all the way around to go to the next hour. There are 30 minutes in a half hour. So to split this in half, instead of going 1 hour, we do half an hour. That means we went 30 minutes instead of the full 60. And there are 24 hours in a day. We have the morning and PM. The reason why there's 24 hours is because we only have 12 on our clock, and it goes to 12 two times. So we have the 12 hours for the morning and then 12 hours for the afternoon. Now when we're looking at this clock, we're going to focus on when our minute hand here is pointing to the 12. So like I said, we always look at the hour hand first, the short hand. So my hour hand is pointing to the 3, so that's where I start. I start at the 3. And then whenever my minute hand is right at the 12, we say o'clock. So this would be 3 o'clock. Or you can write it for 3 o'clock, your 3, and the o'clock, it's 00 because it's starting there. It didn't go around yet, so it starts there, so we're at 0 since it didn't move. So we're going to take some time and practice telling time on a couple clocks. So we have our one here. So remember, we always look first at our short hand, the hour hand. So I'm going to look and see it's pointing to my 2. So there's my hour is 2. And then my minute hand's at the 12. And over here, when we set our minute hands at the 12, we say o'clock. So my minute hand's at the 12, so I'm going to say o'clock. So this says 2 o'clock. Now if I don't want to write out the words, you can also do it like the digital clock. 2, and then for the o'clock, you put your 00. Now you cannot forget your symbol here. This separates our hour to our minute. So our hour goes first on this side, minute goes on this side, so you cannot forget this. Our next clock, again, we're going to first look at our short hand or the hour hand. And that's pointing to our, the 7. And now I notice, now I look for my minute hand. My minute hand's pointing to the 12. And again, when it's pointing to the 12, we say what? O'clock for our minute. So it's 7 o'clock. Or we can write it the digital way, and I have my hour is 7. And I can't forget to separate my hour and my minutes with my 2 dots. And then o'clock, what do we put for the o'clock for the minutes? It's 00 because we're just starting. It didn't go around the clock yet. All right, let's try one more. So here we go. We look for that hour hand or the shorthand first, which is pointing to our number. Right, 4. And again, our minute hand is pointing to 12. So what do we put for the 12? It's 4. Right, we say o'clock. Now, if I don't feel like writing this out, I can write it the digital way. So I have my hour 4. And I cannot forget that symbol to separate my minutes. And for o'clock, the minutes are, right, 0, 0. So today when you're doing your work, you're going to be just focusing on telling time when it's the minute hand's on the 12. So all of your time should say o'clock, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And when you write it, you can also write it with your 0, 0 for the minutes. So when you tell time, you first look for your hour hand. So my hour hand was pointing to the 2, so I wrote 2. I looked and I saw my minute hands pointing to the 12, which means that's o'clock. So it's 2 o'clock, or I can put the 2, 0, 0. Can't wait to see your work.